everybody. You are listening to the History Boys. I am Christopher Whedon, and I am a bit of a Beethoven boy. I do just want to say real quick, I didn't get a chance to say this on the last episode because, there's a lot to say, but I got into Beethoven because my parents had the original, they had, the Ninth Symphony, I think, just on a CD, the whole thing, and I would listen to that.
Compact disc, yeah.
Yeah, on a compact disc. And I would listen to that a lot, and I particularly, that's the one, Ode to Joy, and all that is on at the end there. And, I've always heard that people have considered Ode to Joy to be, one of the greatest achievements of mankind, which I do agree with, up until they developed the Crunchwrap Supreme. Okay.
I'm Tyler Armstrong. I'm a history boy, and not only am I a history boy, but I'm a bit more. I'm a Mozart man, and so there's a rivalry going on in there. And then in addition to that, I'm more of a cheesy Gordita Crunch guy, more so than the rap. So
these are all fighting words.
Yeah,
unacceptable.
I got a lot of hot takes, and I'm coming in hot.
Yeah.
All right. And I am Jerry Nash, your humble history boy, as always. Thank you so much for listening. Today we have Ludwig van Beethoven, Part 2. This is going to be a three-parter, folks. There's just too much to cover in one or two. And joining us again this week, we have King Cyber Tiger himself, Mr. Aaron Weed.
Yes, hello, I am Aaron Weed, and I am a honorary history boy, which is now a title I will take to the grave.
There you go.
I guess I'm a Beethoven boy, sort of by trade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose, I'm a Mexican pizza boy.
No, there you go.
All right.
And it's back. I've heard.
Yeah.
I heard that.
I'm gonna have
we
to
went
check
to
that
war.
out.
We brought it back.
Yeah. They didn't want to give it to us.
No.
Yeah.
But finally, the internet is used for good.
It's
back
home.
the Mexican pizza.
Get some nacho fries and a Mexican pizza, man. To all those people who think we live in the darkest timeline, come on.
Yeah.
So last we left you, Ludwig van Beethoven had arrived in Vienna, making his name as the best piano virtuoso in the European capital of music. His Enlightenment-era belief system made him not a revolutionary, but a music evolutionary, as one biographer put it, which I like.
That's pretty good.
So outside of the sausage, this piano thing is the next thing that they had there. Or did the sausage come later?
It was like their main thing.
The sausage?
It was like their main thing.
I love you.
They're like, can we have
Actually,
two things?
Beethoven did say that he goes, if the Viennese just keep eating their little sausages, they're never going to revolt against any monarchy or any sort of power like that.
And we know that was a dick joke too.
Now, he worked feverishly in the early 1800s, fighting to write his music and say what he wanted to say before his hearing would eventually leave him. And in 1802, he wrote his brothers that letter that we talked about last time that he never sent from Heiligenstadt, expressing his frustration with the cruelty of his eventual fate, his isolation and his depression, and the fact that art itself was his only salvation.
I'd like to think in that letter, he was like, and then I'm going to be deaf, and then everyone's going to be making dick jokes about me, and I'm not even going to be able to defend myself.
Yeah, we can make all the dick jokes we want about him right now.
They're going to be talking about my little Vienna sausage. I'm not going to be able to defend myself.
It's a grower und a shower.
It was so stupid.
It can't be both. Choose one. It's either a grower or a shower. You can't be both.
Yeah. Now, during this time, Beethoven's income came from publishing his works, from the performances of said works, and from his patrons, of course, whom he also gave private performances for, and he would also give them copies of the work that they commissioned, and they could hold on to it for like an exclusive period of time before he could publish it, right? So they paid the premium, they could hold on to it, and only they had it for a certain amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could they have other pianists play the exclusive music?
Yeah, but it's sort of like a social faux pas to do so, and people like Beethoven would have probably taken offense to something like that.
He would have made a scene.
Yeah, well,
and he did.
Yeah, based off of the information that we have, that sounds accurate.
Yeah. No, I
think about stuff though. Like, it's similar to similar to copyright stuff today, right? When all music is being played live, right? Sure, there might be like some kind of faux pas, but at the same time, like, for instance, some high school band directors that I know will sometimes just find music for like marching bands just in like PDF form on the internet somewhere.
Yeah,
I've never done this
on the internet.
Right. Yeah, that's somebody misplaced on the internet. And the thought is, sure, copyright-wise, that's not legal.
Right.
But is no one in the crowd?
Right.
No one in the crowd at a football game is gonna be like, hang on,
wait a minute.
Right.
Do they have the rights to be playing Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne? They don't, like, no one's gonna be like, hang on, did this high school band get the rights to play that song? You know what I mean?
Well, I think, like, if you were just like play the piano in like your home, you're like of the aristocracy. Totally. Yeah. But if you were like gonna put on a concert or something, you would need Beethoven to do it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
I think the marching band is fine as long as you stay away from Metallica or Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love you.
Like, oh no, we must inform the Gary Glitter estate at once.
Yeah.
He's getting hosed. Now, some of his patrons, I named a few of them last time. Two of them they kind of have a similar sort of name. Prince Lobkowitz and Prince Lichnowsky. Okay, both these L sort of very German names. And I don't remember which one I said, but it was Prince Lichnowsky that Beethoven tried to break the chair over his head. I don't know which one I did, but I'll actually tell that story here in a second too. Like,
with
I'll
all due
tell
respect,
you what.
he broke the chair on his head, but it was a cage match, and they were both locked in, and only one man was allowed to leave.
Yeah.
So,
well, they gave him annual stipends, in addition to commissioning works, and of course he had the money from publishing his own works. So this actually made Beethoven the first independent artist. The one, he wasn't making music for anybody. He wasn't making music, like they were like, yes, here, make music. But it was like whenever he pleased. He didn't have to like, oh, this is for your glory. This is for you, like it was all for him, and he fought for that hardcore.
Yeah. All for Letty.
Now, perhaps his most important aristocratic patron was Archduke Rudolph of Austria. He was the youngest son of the emperor, Leopold II. And what they did is he would give him piano lessons and all sorts of stuff because the Archduke was really interested in music. And he would do this, like, he would have one of the most lasting relationships with, like, anyone in his life with the Archduke because he always gave him lessons, like, from this point pretty much until he died, which is kind of nuts. A lot changed in that time, and sometimes, he would have to call it off, but that was definitely a constant relationship he had.
As he was teaching him, was he also constantly degrading him about his poor musical skills?
Oh, probably. Probably.
Tough but fair sensei, I like it.
Yeah. And when he started to lose his hearing too, he could see him playing, and he could see him making mistakes, and like So he was constantly on you, you know. Yeah, he dedicated some of his major works to the Archduke. Yeah, he had around 14 compositions dedicated to Rudolph, including some of his major works like the Missa Solemnis that was dedicated to him, which is pretty amazing, just considering who he decided to dedicate music to going forward, including the beginning of his heroic period, which is what we're going to get into.
Was Rudy his primary patron?
Rudy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of them. He had many. Okay. And some of them dropped out. Some of them were killed in the war.
This was, Beethoven had a heroic period?
He had a heroic period, yeah.
Saving old women from burning buildings and stuff?
He wishes. Not even really. It began around 1804, kind of right after the Heiligenstadt Testament, when he finished his Third Symphony. And it was originally dedicated to Napoleon Bonaparte. And originally it was called the Bonaparte, because he was the bringer of Enlightenment and Republicanism to Europe, and he sort of looked up to Napoleon. However, in May of that same year, Beethoven learned that Napoleon had crowned himself emperor. This really pissed Beethoven off, because you don't do that if you're supposed to be of the Enlightenment, right? He was so mad that he said, quote, "Even with that bastard, I made a mistake," end quote. And, you know, that he will become just like all of them, and he'll use his own ambition to, you know, for himself and all this shit. And he's like, he'll destroy all the rights of man. And he went over to the title page, and he ripped off the cover, and he went to the place where it said Bonaparte on the very top, and he scribbled it off so much that it tore a hole in the paper that can still be seen today.
Yeah.
It was renamed the Eroica.
Dumb idiot. What the what?
No, it was renamed the Eroica, because he didn't tear up the symphony. You know, because the symphony wasn't about Napoleon. It was inspired by Napoleon, but it was about Beethoven. Beethoven is the hero. He's the hero of all of his stories, which are his symphonies, right?
And his little comic books that he writes.
Yeah. He has a zine about a guy named Ludwig Beethoven, and he's going around being the best at music and having a really big dick.
Yeah.
And he's always saving people from burning buildings with it, and then they do it.
Yeah. Kicking ass and getting babes. You know?
Yeah, just kicking ass and getting babes. They're wearing German flag bikinis.
Now, when it was published in 1806, the full title for the Eroica was the Heroic Symphony composed to celebrate the memory of a great man. And people were like, well, that's Napoleon. It's about Napoleon. You know, with benefit of hindsight. It's like, no, it's about him still.
It's about me.
You know? But yeah, if you listen to it, you know, people, when they first heard it, they hated it. They said it was too long, it was too noisy, it was too intense, and after the first after the first time you heard it, you couldn't understand it, you know, it was incomprehensible. You know, it's all about, like, victory and overcoming, you know, struggle, and the shit Beethoven was all about, you know what I mean?
It's like a Lars von Trier movie.
Of its day, maybe. Yeah.
It's as far as how it sounds, and it's been a while now. Again, just like last episode, I've done zero preparation for this. But when you kind of go through and listen, like his first couple, like the first two symphonies, right? You can tell they're Beethoven, but they're very much Beethoven using his. It feels very much like Beethoven applying his knowledge, like
right.
He is putting what he wants to do into the box that is the form. And that's like the biggest thing. There's a lot of music theory stuff that got kind of established in the classical era, but the biggest thing was form that kind of was a hangover from the multi-movement symphony structure of the Baroque era. And it goes down to even not only the movements, where it'll be 4 movements. It's the first one is sort of fast. It's in what's called sonata allegro form. The second one is slow. The third movement is like usually a dance, like a scherzo or a minuet in 3. And then the last one is fast again. When I teach it to students, I say it's fast, slow, dance fast is like how you remember this multi-movement structure, right? So when you listen to it, the first two symphonies really kind of is him fitting his style and his artistic vision into that box. And the third one is really more him just being Beethoven. And like later as you go on, that's why he was considered such a master. But honestly, Eroica, I think in a lot of ways taught him lessons about how to keep his vision accessible to listeners, because I do think it's an incredible version of what he even was able to do at that point musically, but I do think he lost a lot of people on it. I do think it was like too much. I think it was like too outside the box, and in a lot of ways he kind of alienated him. That being said, from like a theory perspective, the Baroque era really kind of started to establish our use of like major and minor modes for different things. If we want something in Western music, if we want something to be happy and or heroic, like it is in a major key, it resolves that way. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, it's why if you want to, I use this example a lot. Not with my students because they have no idea who I'm talking about. But if you look at like heavy music, right? Heavy music is almost always in minor keys because it's dark, it's heavy, and it's whatever. It's why Andrew WK sounded so weird to us when his album I Get Wet came out in 2002 because it's like heavy metal music all written in major keys. It's like he's like singing songs about partying, but then also he has songs about like killing, like all in like weirdly major keys. Like it's weirdly like upbeat, happy, like because it's all in these major keys. Well, in the classical era, they had these weird kind of ideas that kind of carried over about specific keys, and Eroica is mostly written in the key of E flat major, which is like a very specific. Beethoven was like, it's the most heroic of keys, which I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But what's interesting, though, that I think is that later on, the 1812 overture, famous Tchaikovsky, right? That was written about Napoleon's invasion of, I forget what town.
In Russia.
It's like a specific small town in Russia where they invaded the town. The Russians all just boarded themselves up. It was winter, and the French troops essentially just like froze and starved. And it's like it's this sort of like programmatic. It tells the story, like you can follow. It's also written in the key of E flat major. Which is interesting to me. I'm like I always kind of wondered, like, did they do that on purpose as like a reference to Eroica?
It's crazy that you say that, because during the premiere of Eroica, there was another symphony that played that same night, also in the key of E flat major, by Anton Eberl, that we don't even remember. Time doesn't even remember. And that symphony that night actually received better reviews than the Eroica, which is nuts.
Yeah, but you got to look at the whole catalog from a historical perspective, and that's probably what happened, I think.
Eroica to me is like Bowie's Space Oddity, right?
Right.
Bowie was not famous when he wrote Space Oddity. When Space Oddity came out, nobody even looked at it at all. Everyone's like, whatever, just some weird song by this weird dude with big curly hair. It was only after like Ziggy Stardust and he got famous for all that stuff that people started was like, wait, who is this guy? And then started kind of going back and we're like, oh, this is a masterpiece kind of thing.
Right. Here's a quote from the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung. Quote, "Musical connoisseurs and amateurs were divided into separate parties, as they often were. One group, Beethoven's very special friends, maintains that precisely this symphony is a masterpiece. The other group utterly denies this work any artistic value. Through strange modulations and violent transitions, with abundant scratchings in the bass, with three horns and so forth, a true, if not desirable, originality can indeed be gained without much effort. The third, very small group stands in the middle. They admit that the symphony contains many beautiful qualities, but admit that the context often seems completely disjointed, and that the endless duration exhausts even connoisseurs, becoming unbearable to the mere amateur. To the public, the symphony was too difficult, too long. Beethoven, on the other hand, did not find the applause to be sufficiently outstanding. Yeah. And he would write letters back to the Allgemeine. He'd be like, if you think that review is going to bother me, well, you have another thing coming, and you're just throwing your magazine into disrepute by saying those things. You know? It's like, you sound bothered.
It's like a chef when it gets the bad review. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He approaches the guy, and he's like, he's not getting to me.
It's not overcooked on the outside, or overcooked on the outside and undercooked on the inside. It's a molten core of ganache. There's a fucking difference.
Yeah.
I mean, the history of the music of, frankly, white people.
Oh,
right,
yes. Oh, yeah. Western music.
Is marred by being just not only scared of, but like just absolutely vilifying anything that is outside of the expectation, right?
Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, I can't remember if this is something I talked about last time or if it was just something I talked about in the bar with you, Jerry, that night. But it was,
Yeah.
but the Baroque era, they started experimenting with music that evoked an emotional reaction in the listener. But they very specifically wrote like rules that said a single movement should not evoke more than one emotion in the listener, lest it confuse them and upset their humors, right? It was very, so it was, that holdover into the classical era. But yeah, because of those ideas in the Baroque era, right, that were established, talking about emotional content and all that, right? The to us, looking back, Beethoven's changes with Eroica, making stuff slightly longer, using a different form, right? Like, and that's the big thing that threw people off. The opening movement in Sonata Allegro form, it's like, I don't want to get into too much detail about how that form works, but essentially it's the exposition where they present a theme, then they usually present really kind of the same theme in like a different key. And then there's the development section, which is just kind of all bets are off. They do whatever they want for a second. And then the recapitulation, which is the if you didn't, I honestly didn't know that word until I went to music school. That is the long form word of recap.
It's like the conclusion of the conclusion of the essay.
Right, and they hit the same theme again from the beginning, and that's it. That's the first movement, So he expanded, right? Which to us, now doesn't sound crazy, but at the time they were like, "Well, what? Like,
he's a madman."
Well, I never. Yeah, exactly. He's a madman. I'm like,
and
how dare he? Like,
and he would like use fugue as well, like in different movements, which is like fugue is like the most rule-bound genre of them all during this time, and he would use it and bend the fuck out of it, and like that was blowing people's minds. They were like, what the, like there was one guy that even said, is this even music? And that really pissed him off, I
think that's the moment that guy was like, I'm too old. I'm too old.
Wait till you hear Square Pusher.
Yeah.
Bringing that back.
Like my fucking my dad,
Now, Beethoven at this time, he had a position at the Theater an der Wien. It was a theater that was sort of out in the suburbs then of Vienna. It was a big place. It was state-of-the-art for the time.
Like the Tacoma.
But he lost that position because the next director that came in didn't really have any interest in Beethoven. So he got kicked out, and he moved into the suburbs of Vienna with his buddy Stefan von Breuning. Yeah, they lived in this kind of hovel, and like Stefan writes about like just how gross his room was.
It's like with
all the shit. It's very with Nil and I. It was also during this sort of this big productive period of his that Beethoven wrote his only opera. It was from a text, an earlier text called Leonore, or Lenore in the anglicized version of it. It would later be called Fidelio. And basically what it was about, it was in the spirit of like this revolution, this sort of enlightenment type thing. And this woman basically dresses as a man named Fidelio to go into a prison where her husband is being kept, and she frees him, right? And it's this whole thing, you know, of getting away from the oppressed and all this stuff, and the censors held it up and all this stuff. When it was finally played, there were, you know, again, musicians even that were like, we gotta change this. Like, we have to take out like a full movement because, dude, you're going kind of crazy here. When he finally published it, he wasn't happy with it. Anyway,
I desperately hope that in the story of the opera, the husband that's in jail is Beethoven, and he's been locked up for writing too revolutionary of music.
right?
It's like an M. Night Shyamalan. He writes himself into his own fucking...
Always gives himself like the best backstory.
I'm too much of a badass.
Too much of a
I'm in
badass
jail.
for these squares in the system, so they locked me up through way the
this
key.
woman that I swear to God is gonna marry me someday, like comes and rescues me. Like that's that's so him. You know?
She gets me.
Yeah. Also, fun fact: Eyes Wide Shut. My Kubrick fans out there, that is the password to get into like the Illuminati sex cult dungeon.
Not
Fidelio.
Fidelio, yes.
Orgy.
Yeah.
I think honestly, like, if you know anything about Beethoven, which we do at this point, right?
Yeah.
Especially like taking last episode in context, right? Talking about his kind of social troubles and all that. The opera is inherently, especially back then, was, you know, it was stories that you could relate to on like a human experience. It was stories of love and heartbreak. It was stories of betrayal and whatever. It was, you know, human stories. And I think it's no surprise that Beethoven wasn't really adept at forming these stories that, you know, like that could be related to that way, you know. So
He wasn't trying to relate to people. He was trying to just get across his own emotion. Like that's what was sort of so crazy about him too, is that like, you mean it's only ever about you? And he's like, yes. You know? Now, the first time Fidelio was played, it was in the Theater an der Wien, and it was the first time that the French actually occupied Austria. Like, they came in, all the nobles ran, and like they came in and occupied just for a little while, basically to make sure that the peace negotiations for the particular war of the whatever coalition that they're on right now would go in their favor, and it worked. And so during this performance, the place was pretty empty, and it was mainly full of French officers that didn't give a shit about opera or music or anything like that. You know,
this isn't wine and cheese.
What am I gonna do? Feed my mistress operas? I need wine and cigarettes for my children. Come on.
Yeah. Of course, the success of these performances was hindered by that fact, but it wasn't a financial success or a critical success. Pretty much nobody liked it, and it was very embarrassing, very humiliating for Beethoven, certainly. And he just kind of had a distaste, it seems, for the French afterwards. No longer was he sort of like he talked about like moving to Paris and like, you know, living that life for a while, and he doesn't really talk about that after this. Now, when people started talking about like, dude, you got to make your music more understandable, dude. He said, I make music for the connoisseur, not the masses. Which it's such an artistic person thing to say. You know?
That's like Marty Scorsese talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right, exactly. Now, every time, basically, there was another war with Napoleon, which was just often during this short amount of time, when the aristocracy came back, they would tighten the reins on the populace. So, like, Vienna just became, and all of Austria, just became more and more of a police state, and everything was censored. And there was, like, shit that, like, Beethoven was going around saying about the emperor, that people were like, dude, don't say it, you know? Yeah. And he only didn't get bothered because he was Beethoven, you know? But he got in a couple of close calls a few times.
He did write that song, Fuck 'em, I Do What I Want. And,
it was the fuck the police of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
But despite this failure, he did get more patrons, more commissions, even a grand public concert. You have to remember that during this time, like, the time of the year sort of matters as to when you can give these big concerts and people are going to be around to see them. So, you know, the aristocracy, they would leave for a time in the summer, they would leave for a time in the winter. So, and the thing about Vienna is that it had a very small middle class. Like, it wasn't like London that had a pretty big middle class. It was like, you know, 2.5% of the 250,000 residents were actually what we might consider middle class. So not very many people could go to these concerts, because the standard price for a concert ticket was like a week's salary for most people. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a connoisseur salary by the sound of things.
During the sort of fall and winter times, like these like theater spaces were sort of giving out to like rehearsals, performances of operas. And the only time for academies or like public playings of symphonies, right, for the artists' benefit, it would be like if, you know, just Cheap Trick played like a show and they got all the money, right?
Yeah, okay.
What we would consider just a normal concert. The only time you could really do that was during Advent and Lent. That was 6 weeks in that time. And the thing is competition for theater space in that time was just fierce, right?
Oh,
you
yeah.
had to be somebody. And people did absolutely skip over Beethoven for other people that history doesn't even remember.
So are other artists just kind of trying to make their year inside of those windows because they get to keep all the proceeds?
Well, that, if you wanted to play something like original, right, or not an opera, or, you know, these things, then, yeah, it was sort of up to you and your patrons to make your academy, you know, your public concert in that time, yes.
Okay.
And you kind of had to maneuver yourself socially as well. Now, one such time was December 22nd, 1808. Now, this would go down in history as one of the most legendary concerts of all time, right? The program was as follows. There was Symphony No. 6, which was the pastoral. There was A Perfidio, which was a concert aria. There was Gloria, which was a mass in C major, and you kind of had to finagle a few things because you weren't supposed to play church music in private spaces. It was a whole thing back then. Anyway, there was a Piano Concerto No. 4, Opus 58, and of course the Symphony No. 5, which you all know, right?
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun, right?
Yeah.
There was
Saxophone.
yeah, there was the Sanctus, which was sort of another mass, and then there was a improvised Fantasia solo piano that Beethoven himself was going to play, and then there was a choral fantasy for piano soloists, vocal soloists, chorus, and orchestra at the very end. The whole thing was 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Now, concerts were longer back then, but it was especially long, probably for two reasons. It was cold as fuck that day, and it was an unheated concert hall, and it was a lot all at once. Yeah, that's what, like, everybody said. Like, dude, we listened to fucking everything, it was all new, and I don't know, you know? Listening to one of these things is nuts, you know?
I mean, is there like food? Is there intermissions? Is there?
There's one.
Is there wine?
It's in two parts. There's one intermission. It's a lot, and it was a lot back then.
I would just wait for it to come out on streaming. Watch it at home so I can pause it. Take the breaks when I want to.
Yeah.
Right. Beethoven was losing his hearing at this time, and he had tried to, like, play privately, like, piano for people, and it wasn't really going well. He kept, like, losing his place because he couldn't hear it, you know, sometimes, and he would get humiliated a few times, and, like, all of the musicians in the band, there was, like, this thing that happened a month earlier, and they're like, they swore that time, like, I'm never playing for that motherfucker ever again. Because, like, he got frustrated and, like, he started playing, like, people were laughing because every time he conducted, he had these wild gestures and he would knock over candles and shit. And he did it twice, and people were laughing, and the band was laughing, and he, like, harangued the band and he yelled at, you know, and his words stung, you know, so
he didn't know what he was saying, but they did, and it was really mean stuff.
Yeah, they swore not to play with them ever again, but of course they did.
Yeah.
And
because he showed up hat in hand at their house, and he was like, let's get the band back together. It's not going to be about money this time. It's really going to be about the music, mostly old stuff, you know, for the fans. And, you know, got
and
the
I'm
band
sorry
back
about
together.
all the things I said about all your mothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that whiskey bottle I slung at you. Water under the bridge.
My bad. Actually, when he got in arguments with his friends and things, because it was, you know, never easy being his friend, he would always, you know, profusely apologize and say, like, it wasn't me, it was the passion.
Oh, yeah.
I kid you not. He says that. He
says
says that.
Very
He got the
good.
passion.
I'm stealing that one.
Yeah.
I'm stealing that.
That's great.
Oh, you have to forgive me.
It was
You
the
have to forgive me.
passion.
There
I was
wasn't me.
overcome.
It was the passion.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Very good.
But the whole concert just did not go well. The choral fantasy was actually the last to be composed, and it was barely finished in time for the concert. They even said, like, we played it while it was still wet. You know what I mean? Like, the ink hadn't dried, you know? And so they barely had time to rehearse it or anything like that. A couple of the times when he was playing piano, they stopped because they got off, you know, like, and so far off that, like, it started to break down, you know? And anyone that's ever, like, played music with, like, a bunch of people knows that feeling, like, oh, fuck. And he would stop, and, like, in the middle of this freezing cold, like, 4-hour concert, he'd be like, we're going again from the top, repeats included. And everyone's like, fuck.
Oof. What a fucking disaster.
Yeah. It was a disaster. The female soloist for the choral fantasy, she actually dropped out at the last minute because of something Beethoven had said. You know, he yelled at her one time and she left.
Said women be shopping, and she got mad and fucking
so
bounced.
he got a replacement, and she was so afraid that night that Beethoven would, like, you know, yell at her or, you know, in front of all these people. Because he's done it before. He had just done it, you know? She got so afraid that her voice, like, croaked and she couldn't sing because of stage fright. And it's like, oh, no.
Probably could have been a little nicer.
Yeah. Contemporary accounts describe Beethoven as the conductor, but a lot of people believe that the musicians were not paying attention to him. Because he could get off, you know, and like off time, and it could ruin everything. So they all just, like, don't pay attention to him.
Yeah,
don't
it's not like he's
him.
gonna know.
Yeah. And a lot of people, like, you know, certain things did go well. Like, you know, the Pastoral Symphony went well. The Fifth Symphony went well. The thing is that it was a lot to take it all at once. Even like friends of Beethoven were like, we now know the meaning of too much of a good thing. You know? On the same night, December 22nd, Antonio Salieri himself was giving a benefit concert for widows and orphans of Napoleon's war. And he tried to make people boycott Beethoven's concert because he was like, are you fucking, like, a concert for just him? Like, you know, right after this?
I was hoping that he would dedicate it to Beethoven just to be a dick.
Yeah.
My poor ailing, you know.
He threatened to ban musicians that played Beethoven's show, too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty serious. However, though, Beethoven did have his fans, like E.T.A. Hoffmann, Tales of Hoffmann. He wrote the text that later became operas and whatnot. He reviewed the concert in the Allgemeine Musikalische Zeitung, and he recognized the Fifth Symphony as one of the most important pieces in musical history. He provided a full analysis of the Fifth Symphony. These essays are basically what the romantics of like the next age, the next era, would point to as like a bridge between the classical period and the romantic period. It's crazy because that symphony is almost nothing like anything else that's ever come before it, because it's just these variations and counterpoints on these four notes that just go over and over again, this repetition of the same thing. And like, that's why we remember it so well. Like, that's why it sticks with us. And it's also, you know, like a riff of any song that we have now. You know, it uses limited number of notes, sort of played in a couple of different ways, on and on. You know, that's the song, right?
You know, I wonder if there's been if anyone's tried to essentially redo that concert in a more modern setting.
They've tried, absolutely, yeah. They've done it a few times.
If all that went off without a hitch, it'd be kind of a cool night, right? Like, you know, you still got if you get your intermission in there, be able to get some snacks and some wine, maybe some popcorn.
It wouldn't. I'm 100% positive someone has recreated that concert, and probably people loved it.
Multiple times.
I can't necessarily like. I have no real frame of reference for this, but I've always thought that Beethoven and his music is, especially if you like track the trajectory of Western music through the Romantic era into the 20th century, right? It starts with Beethoven, and then it ends with like one of my favorite things in 20th century quote unquote classical music is this opera that Philip Glass wrote called Einstein on the Beach.
Oh, love it.
It's 4 hours long, no intermission, and it's complete like chaos and nonsense. It's complete madness. I have always very badly wanted to see it live. Like if anyone is ever performing it around me, I'm going to go as like a personal challenge to myself. Because I'm like I've watched like half-hour-long clips of this thing, and I'm like, this is just buck wild craziness. It's a dude on a typewriter with a microphone on it while there's a woman on the other side of the stage just reciting random numbers. Like, it's that kind of madness.
I like that super artsy shit, man.
Well, I honestly believe like that Beethoven and those like Hoffman reviews I think are a good example. He was sort of the beginning of like, if you don't like it, you don't get it. Like that's sort of 100%. Like artistic attitude that 100% that totally like spread through this sort of, you know, not to make it sound overly negative because I think it can be fun sometimes and good sometimes, but like that elitism of like that spreads through everything. It spread through like prog rock in the 70s, right? Like these big ridiculous long rock symphonies or whatever, you know, and people are like, this is ridiculous. Like, oh, if you don't like it, you just don't get it. And it's like,
and that's how that's exactly how Beethoven was though. He was like, if you don't get it, then you can fuck right off. And like that's exactly what he believed.
And I totally think that attitude of him garnered fans who like adopted the same. They're like, well, he's a genius.
They're like Radiohead fans.
Exactly. Like it's exactly that, right? Like, and you know,
people who recommend reading like Ulysses or Infinite Jest.
It's like, give me a fucking break.
You know.
Yeah.
I like accessible art. Yeah, I like all my art to be as accessible as possible.
Well, Beethoven. Even people now, people say about Beethoven that he did not make music for entertainment. He didn't make it to be particularly enjoyable to listen to. He made it for himself and nothing else. You know, he thought that orchestral music in this way was the best way to get across inner emotions.
He reminds me of a lot
in a
of
way that
like,
no one else had.
our tour directors.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Now, some people say that the Fifth Symphony is about fate, because Anton Schindler, who was the untrustworthy sort of lackey assistant Beethoven had later in his life that we'll get to later, he claimed, quote, "The composer himself provided the key to these depths when one day, in this author's presence, he pointed to the beginning of the first movement and expressed in these words the fundamental idea for his work. Thus fate knocks at the door." End quote. So stupid. So stupid. That did not happen, dude. And a lot of people don't think that happened.
He was like, how can I make this about me?
Yeah, that's what Anton Schindler did. He had Beethoven had conversation books later on in his life. You know, he walked around basically with a notepad where he could write shit down, and you show each other. You know, so he has these surviving conversation books, and Anton Schindler like fucked with a few of them to make himself look like way cooler. A lot of people are like, yeah. So like the movie Immortal Beloved is based heavily on what Anton Schindler has to say. That's why that movie is a load of dog shit as far as history goes. Yeah,
Leave
it's a
it
good
to a
movie,
guy named Schindler to cook the books and fucking just not be reliable at all.
Oh, no.
Now, I'm gonna be just sort of jumping a little bit in time here, but what I'm gonna do, I promise, I will put it all together for you. Now, in 1808, Beethoven wanted to leave Vienna at the invitation of Jerome Bonaparte. The thing was, he was offered a Kapellmeister position in like the French court in like Sweden, you know, and he was like, and he went over to his buddies, you know, his patrons in Vienna. He's like, they want me over there. I'm gonna go. They want me to be the Kapellmeister. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take the job. You know, you guys don't want me as one. So
What is a Kapellmeister?
it's music director. We talked about this in the last episode. His grandfather were Kapellmeisters in Bonn, and he was like, I'm gonna go. That's where the real money is. That's what.
And we use that term?
Yeah, Kapellmeister. Yeah,
Okay, well...
music director.
Then for the folks, you know what? I didn't do that for me. I did that for the folks who just needed a refresh since, the last episode. So I'm glad that we're able to...
Who are jumping in with this episode. They're just starting. New History Boys fans.
Yeah, he was testing
jumping
us.
in.
It's a first episode, and it's good that we're retreading some of that. So I did that for you guys. Please and thank you, and let's move on.
Now, he had a long-standing friend in the Countess Anna Marie Erdotti. I actually don't exactly know how to pronounce that. She was a countess that had him over at her place, at her salon all the time, and she was always really friendly with him. And what she did is she kind of rallied the wealthiest of Beethoven admirers, the Archduke, Prince Lobkowitz, Prince Kinsky, all these guys, and was like, we need to give... Prince Kinsky was killed in battle, by the way.
Prince Kinsky sounds like a Knight's Tale, like a commoner who like put on some fancy clothes and snuck into a party, and they were like, "Who are you?" And he was like, "I'm Prince Kinsky." Prince Kinsky.
Yeah.
Well, his last name was Prince Ginsky. Yeah. And so he was like, Prince, and they're like, oh, he's a prince, and he's like, yes, Prince Kinsky.
Prince Kinsky. His name was Tom Pritzkinski.
Yeah. He was the great-grandfather, great-great-great-whatever-grandfather of Klaus Kinski.
Yeah, that was what my thought was.
Yeah.
Played by David Krumholtz.
Okay.
It's like, how do I get in this situation?
So they gave him basically an annual allotment, annual grant, 4,000 florins, which was a lot of money. And it allowed him, again, to live without financial constraint or anything like that. So the only condition was he had to stay in Vienna. And So he did. And yeah, back to independent composing, they were back in his pocket. He was writing as he pleased again. However, in May of 1809, didn't last very long because the French, story for another day, started to barrage Vienna with cannon fire. They started bombarding the city. Beethoven took refuge in his brother's cellar, putting 2 pillows over his ears to guard from the sound of the bombs. Right.
Did he really,
It's one of those stories. He's
thinking like he's got a finite amount of boom booms. Yeah. And he's like, I gotta save him. I gotta save him for the next music.
Exactly.
Like, I only got 5 boom booms left.
Yeah.
Oh, give me the pillows.
Yeah, I blew them all with that Fifth Symphony, and now I only got a few left. His brother Caspar Karl, right? Remember him? The subsequent occupation of Vienna this time, and the disruptions of cultural life and to Beethoven's publishers together with Beethoven's poor health, it explained why he wasn't totally putting out the same amount of music at this point in time. There was a lot going on, folks, in this particular point in time. Although a couple of works from this year do emerge, which is kind of crazy. He has a couple of string quartets, including the harp. He has a piano sonata in F-sharp major, Opus 78, which was actually dedicated to the sister of one of the Brunswicks that he mentored on the piano, Therese Brunswick, and this will come up later. Again, the French came in, they left. Nobles came back, became more of a police state. It just happened again, right? This time, though, there would be no talk of freedom. You couldn't even say freedom. Or revolution. You couldn't say that. Or nothing about the individual spirit. So even the style of like how Beethoven made music for himself, for that sort of individualistic spirit, that itself was revolutionary in the minds of the aristocracy in Vienna.
They had to start calling freedom fries French fries.
Yeah.
The other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is actually where it came from.
Yeah. July of 1812, Beethoven leaves Vienna to go get his treatments, right, for his presumable Crohn's disease and his deafness. It is in this time that he wrote a letter. He wrote it between 2 days in July. It's an 8-page letter. We found this, historians found this when he passed away.
I found it.
Historians, his brothers found it when he passed away.
I found it.
Yeah, I found it. It's an 8-page letter.
Jerry found it.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing because it's become to be known as the Immortal Beloved letter. Mm-hmm. Now, before I read any of this, it will never be known exactly who the letter was supposed to be for, and it's still a heated matter of debate to this day. So I'll give you an excerpt from the letter. It's very long. It's 8 pages. I'm only giving you an excerpt where he gushes out all of his feelings towards this person that we only know as the Immortal Beloved. In the morning, my angel, my all myself, only a few words today, and indeed with pencil, with yours. Only tomorrow is my lodging positively fixed, with a worthless waste of time on such. Why this deep grief? Where necessity speaks, can our love exist, but by sacrifices, by not demanding everything you can change it? That you, not completely, be mine. I am not completely yours. Oh God! Then he goes on to say, down here, can life exist in our relationship? Angel, right now, I hear that the mail goes every day, and I must therefore close, so that you will receive the letter immediately. Be calm. Only through quiet compassion of our existence can we reach our goal to live together. Be patient. Love me today. Yesterday, what longing with tears for you. You, my love, my all. Farewell. Oh, continue to love me. Never misjudge the most faithful heart of your beloved. L. Forever yours, forever mine, forever us.
Wow.
This is 8 pages. I read the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
There's a lot in between.
He wrote it about himself.
Yeah, right.
No, and this is actually something you learn about in music school, big music school. He actually wrote that about his favorite pen, actually.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say that there was a response to the letter that was like, yeah, babe, I love hearing from you, but your last check bounced, and I need the money to keep coming in if you want to keep this thing going.
Yeah.
The actual historical response to that letter, and they don't know who sent it. Actually, it was simply a note that was sent back that just said, "New phone, who dis?"
Yeah. He never sent it. It was sealed. It was just never sent.
Mm-hmm. Never sent. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know. Maybe I don't know the story. I don't know that much, but like knowing his history,
right,
of becoming sort of obsessed with like,
right,
these young women that were either his students or like sisters of his friends or students or whatever. I'm like, ugh.
It could have been anybody. And then they're all, like, below the age of 20. I promise you this.
He would have sent it off to somebody and they would have been like, ugh, another letter from creepy Uncle Beethoven.
No, we have a few suspects. But there's, like, over 20 women in Beethoven's life that he was involved with or obsessed with for a short period of time, and always a short period of time. It never really goes much further than that. The first is Bettina Von Arnhem. For her time, she was a independent woman. She was a writer, a publisher, a friend and muse to the great minds of Europe of the day, like the likes of Goethe, where she had a, sort of an on-again, off-again sort of extramarital affair with a little bit. She actually arranged for Beethoven and Goethe to get together, but they really respected each other and they liked each other's work, but their meeting didn't really go well. They didn't really like each other. They didn't really get along very well.
You don't say.
Yeah.
I got my money on her.
She was flirtatious, but also sort of unattainable for Beethoven. And a lot of people think that, the first thing you need to be a suspect for the immortal beloved is you got to be friendly with Beethoven, first off. Okay. And you have to be around him in 1812. She was not around him in 1812. So that one's out.
Oh, never mind. I retract my earlier statement.
Yeah. There was Thérèse Malfatti, different Thérèse. He had taught her. At one point, he proposed marriage to her without giving any sort of warning or anything like that. Just one day, out of the blue, he said, "Do you want to marry me?" And she was like, "No, you're crazy." She actually said, like, "No, you're crazy."
And he responded
she called him ugly.
Oh.
I think she called him ugly.
And his dick small.
Yeah, ugly, your dick small, and he's like, "So you're telling me there's a chance?" You didn't say no. What if I go, "Come on"?
Yeah.
I'm not above begging.
But Teresa Malfatti, it is believed that Für Elise was written for her, and that's why people say, maybe it's her. There was also Amalie Sebald. She was a German soprano singer. They may have met in the spa town where Beethoven would go for his treatments that year. They may have had a bit of a tryst. But, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and she's like the third woman that is in this town that they say they could have had a thing. And it's like, okay, but she's the least likely,
Who was alive at the time?
When she first met him, she was like, "You seem pretty happy to see me." And he's like, "Oh no, my pants are full of leeches."
And he didn't look well, you know what I mean? Like, people
You
said
wouldn't
that,
either
like,
if your pants were full of leashes.
that he walked around with, like, holes in his coat, like, half a shirt on sometimes, and he didn't seem to care. Like, his hair was always a mess, too. Some people say it was the Countess Anna Maria von Eridati, simply because she had him over to her salons all the time, and she was longtime friends. Probably bullshit. She was a countess. I just don't think so. Most people don't think so. There was Dorothea von Artmann. She was a piano player, and she was said by Schindler to be on friendly terms with Beethoven, and he like dedicated a sonata to Dorothea, and one time they were like really romantic together, and like Beethoven's like, now we're gonna talk in tones. And like they started like playing the piano. It's so stupid. It's mushy as fuck. But there's no other real evidence for that. Now, the two most likely ones. There are people that 100% believe one way. There are people that 100% believe the other. I've heard good arguments for both, honestly. The first is Josephine Brunswick, the older sister. Marie, remember Therese Brunswick? She had, something dedicated, to her. He was piano teachers to both of the girls.
This was the older sister?
Yes.
Yeah, it couldn't be her.
Shocking. Yeah.
Well, it is said there is a private collector that won't let anyone see them, but that they had love letters between the two.
They're written on gold plates.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But only I can see him.
She was indeed unhappy in her first marriage, and she was widowed early. And it was around this time that she was getting remarried to a much older baron that they could have gotten together. And a lot of people say, and like Therese Brunswick was like, why doesn't she just get with Beethoven? She likes Beethoven. One of the few people to return Beethoven's affection.
The only thing she liked more than Beethoven was pizza. And that baron had it.
And they called him the Red Baron.
Yes.
And he later started the first frozen pizza company.
Yeah.
That was a good joke.
That's great.
It was.
I liked the team up. We did it.
I was trying to think of a way
Very
to work in a plane in there, and it just wasn't happening.
Wasn't working.
It's too early.
Yeah.
For many people, the reason why Josephine is the smoking gun for the immortal beloved is because 9 months after her supposed visit to this spa town, she had a daughter named Minona, right? And they go, you see? Right? And her husband was away, right? The Baron was away. So many people say that. She, of course, couldn't marry him. He was a commoner. Couldn't be married, right?
He was ugly.
Yeah.
He had a weird dick.
Most historians agree, though, that it was actually Antony Brentano. They were sort of always on friendly terms. They lived in the same hotel in 1812 in this spa town.
He doesn't
put
live
him
in a
right-
hotel.
They were very good roommates.
Yeah, right? Why are they in the same bed? He had dedicated... He wrote a one-movement trio, just like for him, a quick, little trio for her daughter. She had children. A lot of people say, well, it couldn't be Antony Brentano. She had kids. And it's like, unhappy marriage, guys. All these women married to, like, aristocracy were in unhappy marriages. I can almost guarantee you that.
I mean, the first happy marriage of all time was in the 70s, and that was a big deal then.
Yeah. But Beethoven's... he had also a lasting friendship with her husband, Franz Brentano. And he also, like, borrowed money from the guy. And people were like, would Beethoven do that to, like, his friend?
Yeah.
And they were
would.
like, I don't know, he might,
Beethoven
But-
puts two things on a pedestal: his own skills as a composer, and then pussy.
Pretty much on unhealthy pedestals, nonetheless. We'll never know who it is. Most people agree it's Antony Brentano, but there's just as many people that say it's Josephine Brunswick. However, during this heroic period, this is what this period of his life would become known as. He became certainly a celebrity. You know, they started doing portraits of him if they could get him to sit still long enough to do it. He hated sitting still for a portrait. There's a famous life mask that you've all probably seen of Beethoven. When he first laid down for this life mask, they put the plaster on his face. He thought he was going to suffocate. He panicked, and he tore it off of his face, and it shattered on the floor, and he ran out. And the guy, like, glued it back together and made that bust.
Yeah. Here's a bust that kind of looks like Beethoven.
Right? Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's why you kind of get the smushed face and the, you know, like the sneer. You know, it's from that sort of process. And during the second occupation, I believe during the second occupation, this is the chair incident with Prince Lichnowsky. So, like, they were playing, and Lichnowsky is trying to, like, ingratiate himself with the French officers. So he invites them all to dinner, and he's like, Beethoven's gonna play. And it's like, well, you didn't tell Beethoven that. And, like, he showed up, and he's like, you just want me to play? Like, I'm just here to play for you. So, like, he goes and hides.
What am I, a clown?
Yeah, exactly.
He showed up with a napkin stuffed in his shirt and a fork and a knife, and he answers the door. And he's like, "What's for dinner, guys?"
He thought he was just eating.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, now I gotta play now?
Yeah.
So he goes and hides, and they search the whole place, like the whole chateau. And they find him in, like, the farthest wing, in, like, the farthest room of the farthest wing. And, like, they're knocking on the door. Lichnowsky, like, is, like, trying to talk him down through the door, you know? He's like, come on out, it'll be fine. And he's like, no! You know? And, like, finally, like...
It's so
like,
childish.
he insults the French. Yeah, it's very childish. He insults the French. He insults Lichnowsky for being so presumptuous. They break the door down, and just as they come in, like, Beethoven, like, picks up a chair, and he's gonna smash it over his head. And, like, a dude, like, gets in the way. Yeah, and, like, they kick him out that night, and he walks home, takes his suitcase with him, and, like, he has a bunch of music in his suitcase, of course, because he's wearing the clothes he has, you know? And it's raining that night, and when he gets home, he, like, smashes a bust of Lichnowsky, and, like, his suitcase leaked. And to this day, you can see on the original copy of the Appassionata the water damage on it from this particular trip, which is fucking fantastic.
That's great.
And so, like, Lichnowsky, he cut him off for a little bit, but they, like, sort of came back together again, and he like, go and listen to Beethoven and then just quietly leave, and, like, that's how their relationship kind of was for a while.
It's like, that wasn't me, it was the passion.
Yeah, exactly.
The passion broke a chair over your head.
Yeah.
And frankly, the passion came hungry that night and was really looking forward to having a good meal with friends, okay?
Yeah. And his so-called apology, it's not an apology, reads like this. Quote, Prince, what you are by circumstance and birth. What I am through myself. Of princes there have been and will be thousands. Of Beethovens there is one and can only be one.
That's why I'm sorry you disrespected me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, it's very good.
I mean, I might be a dick, but I can fix that. You can't fix how ugly you are.
Yeah.
Be mean.
Now, there's the rest of the Heroic period. You know, it goes all the way up until his 8th Symphony. However, my personal favorite of Beethoven's symphonies is the 7th. And that is why we are going to start with that on the next episode of Ludwig van Beethoven.
Oh, very good.
This is such a journey through history and also through music. I feel like I'm getting double blasted from Aaron and Jerry. And
that's why Aaron is on the show.
It is as sexy as it sounds, folks at home.
Yeah.
Well, I will say it's funny for me because really, like, so much of music history when it's taught through the lens that I received it is using it as a vehicle for teaching music theory, right? Like they're teaching music history from the terms of like the actual musical innovations that happened and how things changed. They're not getting into a lot of the stuff that Jerry's digging into. So it's honestly pretty interesting for me. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't really get and stuff that like I've been curious about. For instance, I'm sure this will come up at some point, maybe in the next episode as we keep talking, but one of my favorite romantic area composers, Hector Berlioz, he wrote this symphony called Symphony Fantastique. That if you don't know anything about it, this goes for the fellow history boys here and listeners at home, just go like read the Wikipedia page on this symphony. It's a 5-movement thing that tells the story of an artist. It's very much like a friend of mine. Like it tells the story of like a composer who he sees a woman in public and falls in love with her. He never speaks to her, but he goes home and in his imagination imagines their entire relationship and then imagines that she spurns him and breaks his heart. And in his broken-hearted stupor from imagining this, he throws himself into an opium stupor. He does a shitload of drugs. And now this is all the story told in this like symphony, right? That Berlioz tells. And then while he's in this stupor, he imagines that he kills her. Then he imagines that he is dragged off and put to death. And then the final movement, he imagines in his opium stupor that he is tied up in a forest and being tortured by a demonic version of his beloved.
That's fucking awesome. That's metal as fuck.
In like a witch's Sabbath.
Dude.
Yeah, that's this whole thing. And I'm like...
I'm on the Wikipedia page right now.
Oh, dude, it's insane.
So Leonard
it's so
Bernstein...
great. Like,
Leonard Bernstein, he says it's hallucinatory, dreamlike, like what you said. He also goes, this is a quote. How do you pronounce his last name?
Berlioz.
Berlioz tells it like it is. You take a trip, you wind up screaming at your own funeral.
I fucking love Leonard Bernstein forever. But also, like, the whole thing is so, like, it's very much like a friend of mine. I'm like, dude, you did a lot of drugs and then decided to write some music about it. That's what happened here. You fell in love with some woman you never met, and then you did a bunch of drugs about it and whatever. Like, but it's his, Beethoven's that immortal beloved letter, right? The first thing I thought was like, well, I feel like composers and artists like him have a history of like falling in love with women that never, didn't even know they existed, kind of thing.
That's like the drop of a hat. Like,
that's even what like Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy's about, right? Like there was some chick that Beatrice or something like that he was super in love with, like as a kid, and then she died, and then. She's like, you got to go through hell and back, brother. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And he does all the stuff, and she's like, I don't even know who you are, dude.
Yeah. Nobody's read that. I don't know what happens. Nobody's read Paradiso.
Yeah, and that's why, like, the analysis of who that letter could have been about, to me, is funny, because, like, I would bet money that whoever that letter was about, like, they maybe exchanged some kind words at best, and she immediately forgot the encounter. You know what I mean? Like
There's only
I doubt it was anybody. Like
there's only 2 women that have they say that they had friendly relations, that they were friendly, but there was only one woman on record. One woman. She was 15, and she is the only one on record that wrote it down that she actually liked him, and wanted to like be with Beethoven. One.
Right.
She was into weird shit and she was just a kid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. It was a face.
Yeah. We'll talk about her in the next episode. We'll also talk about the conspiratorial suspect that I didn't bring up. That we haven't met yet. There's a conspiratorial one. It's almost certainly bullshit, but it comes from, Anton Schindler. It's what the movie is based on. We'll talk about that.
Would you say she was on his
list?
His list?
Yeah. Walked right into that.
That was stupid. That was a stupid joke.
Yeah, it was great.
Every joke I do is a stupid joke, so I'm I think it's a great joke.
Oh, yeah?
It's very good.
The listeners at home haven't realized we love stupid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good.
Oh, sorry, Jerome Bonaparte, that was Westphalia, not Sweden. His other relation was King of Sweden, he put him as anyway, not really that important, but
yeah, I was
going to
say, I'm glad you
I knew it was wrong.
I was gonna don't want to make you look stupid.
Yeah.
Well, there we are, gang. I can't wait for number 3. Pretty excited. I like Beethoven, so I'm just gonna say that I'm a history boy, and I'm Christopher Whedon, and I said it backwards. Good night.
I'm going with that. You got to change it up sometimes. I'm Tyler Armentrout. I'm not a Mozart man. I'm a Beethoven boy. I'm a history boy. I'm learning. I'm growing. And just really enjoying this series. Jerry, you want me to handle the housekeeping, or you got it?
Yes, please.
If you liked this episode, there's so many more to listen to everywhere where you can find podcasts. Feel free to support us in a number of ways. You can leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, many of the services that have rating systems. All of that helps. If you want to help us even more, you can join our Patreon for as little as $1 per month, where you can get everything from access to our Discord, to in-episode shout-outs, all the way up to exclusive content. And I think we mentioned it in the last one, but we're now originally our exclusive hour-long per month show, the HistoryBoiz Presents the Tyler Armentrout Project, featuring Christopher Whedon, is now available for the first month of every episode's release at the $5 Patreon level. So definitely check that out if you didn't have access to it before. Now as long as you listen to it in the first month it's out, you get to listen to every new episode. So you can hop in there and get in the chat on the Discord and all that stuff in between. So
yeah, by the time this episode releases, we will have another one out. Sorry about the delay on that, but life happens.
And with that, I am Jerry Nash, your humble history boy as always. Thank you so much for listening. We love our listeners. We love our patrons. We love all of you so very much. Mr. Aaron, do you want to take us out again?
Yeah, sure. My name's Aaron Weed. I am a honorary history boy. I will be back for the 3rd installment. You can find me on Instagram at CyberTigerMusic. My album will be coming out at the end of June. If you're in the Seattle area, you can find it where I'm playing live. Come check it out. You can ask me about Beethoven, and I will say, that's crazy. Thank you guys for having me, and thank you all for listening. Love you, bye.
We'll see you next time. For the guest belongs forever.